Painting has changed constantly for me over the years. It's something that has evolved through time, and I think will continue to evolve through time as I work and practice as an artist. I began as a pencil artist when I was a young child into my teenage years, and then my interest in color started to grow on me probably when I was a teenager, and I tried colored pencils. I've dabbled in paint throughout those years, but it was intimidating to me, and even though I had the desire to do color, painting was something that I just wasn't sure if I was ready for at the time. But eventually, I did end up trying to use paints in my work, and naturally, acrylic sounded just much more easier to me, and I thought that I could find growth in that versus oils, which had a lot of variables and factors that went into not only the materials, but the techniques and the process. And it was just, as a 18-year-old or 20-year-old kid, without modern resources that we have today, I just didn't know where to start. So acrylics were something that I found easy to pick up and try to teach myself. So then over the following 6 or 7 years, I began to try to teach myself everything that I thought there was to know about acrylics, about painting, try to figure it out for myself. And at some point in time, that's where a lot of you were probably introduced to my work, was when I was probably at the height of acrylic use in my work. And that, of course, has evolved a lot since then, and I've gone through many changes as an artist, and the way I think about the paintings that I do, the way I think about how I want them to be interpreted and how I want them to be viewed, and most importantly, how I go about creating them. And that part of it, to me, is something that I've realized I need to be a lifelong student in, and make changes to my approach as I go and figure out ways to adapt to what works best for me. And so I don't think as a painter, as an artist, I'll ever really have it figured out for myself. And I think I would prefer it to be that way if I had a choice, because the curiosity of what else is out there and what else I can learn as an artist and as an oil painter or painter in general is really the reason why I like to do what I do. If I had it all figured out, I don't think the challenge would be there enough for me to have an interest in it. And so that's where a lot of my love for this skill really stems from. And that's also a major reason why you've seen so many changes in the way in which I work, and why I've progressed forward and not really tried things that I've done in the past, or at least not yet. Because I still know that there's things out there for me to learn, for me to try, see if I can't find something that will spark my curiosity in a different way that might send me into a new path of artwork. All these things is what excites me to get up to paint each day. And so when it came to these horses that I'm painting, which will be 6 in total for a friend, a client, it's been really helpful for me to focus on the same subject and repeat that over the course of all of these paintings. It has allowed me to think about my approach and how I do certain things and why I do them. And so this is a good example of where I find places to make changes in my work and to grow in my techniques. Recently, I started to paint more in wet paint layers rather than layering wet over dry layers of paint, which is a common practice and probably my favorite way to work with acrylics. But working with more wet paint has really opened the door to more of these different avenues that I speak of, which help me learn new brushwork techniques or layering techniques or color mixing techniques, things like that. And I think I've seen a lot of changes even in the last 4 or 5 months in my work, as you probably have. And I think one of the things that I've learned while working in this way is the importance of my underpainting. The way in which I do the underpainting can really dictate how things appear as I'm applying the wet paint over the top of that. And although I've had a personal method of how I do my underpainting pretty consistently over the years, painting more in alla prima has really challenged the way in which I do that. So as I worked on these horses, and this is currently the 4th of 6 paintings, I began to notice certain things that didn't work for me, or maybe more so exposed some weaknesses in how I used to work. And the one thing that seemed just most obvious to me to take a look at was my underpainting. So what I've started to adopt is, when painting subjects that require a lot of focus, a lot of accuracy and precision, such as a horse, is using a combination of titanium white, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue along with paint thinner to shade all of the values as accurately as I can throughout the entire subject. And in this case, mostly just on the horse. I did do some shading and a lot of this underpainting work on the landscape as well, but it wasn't as thought out or as accurate as the way that I completed this part on the horse. And this type of method isn't too far off from what I used to do. I used to add more color as I worked throughout my underpainting. I used to do a lot of my underpainting in acrylics because it allowed me to add that color and work quickly. It's much more difficult, I would say personally, to use color in an oil underpainting. Once you start to add color, you start to complicate things. The slow drying times make you more committed into what you're doing, and then having to wait for all of that to dry before making drastic changes to that. Versus acrylics, you can really experiment as you work on your underpainting, and that dries quickly, which allows you to move on to a different color, make that drastic change that you're looking for if need be. And you can really work through a lot of ideas and a lot of kinks in things that you see wrong in what you're trying to portray rather quickly and very quickly, which is why I loved to do my underpaintings in acrylics in the past, and why I used more color in the past in that way. But now I've started to think about, if I'm painting more wet on wet, maybe I should work or think about how I begin the painting in a slightly different way. And the most obvious way to me in which I could make a change and try something new was to just stick with oils throughout the entire process. And so the way in which I'm doing this is very similar to the way in which I used to do underpaintings. However, because I'm now working with oils, I'm trying to avoid using a lot of color initially. So what I began with in the beginning of this video was some paint thinner, a lot of paint thinner mixed with a little bit of white paint for some of the highlights, and a little bit of burnt sienna and or ultramarine blue for some of the shadows. Sometimes I would mix the combinations of those two together to bridge the gap in between. And I tried to just create sort of a warm black and white depiction of the piece of artwork that I was creating. So I worked through that underpainting rather quickly, paying attention to where the values need to be, the level of contrast that I need to have, how bright the highlights are. And I let that dry maybe 2 to 3 days. And then I begin this process in which you're seeing me work through now. And that process is something that I've covered in a few of my most recent previous videos. I'm using a lot more oil paint, a lot less medium, and painting and working through the entire landscape and horse all wet on wet paint, which was done over the course of about a week or so. And I do that by breaking down the painting in different segments and then working through each one day at a time, wet on wet paint. So overall, working on these 6 horse paintings, which is a lot different and takes a lot more discipline to complete than my normal work, has really been a pleasure and a pleasant surprise in how much it's helped me refine my techniques and work on some of the things that help me grow and progress as an artist. This method of painting the underpainting in this way and then alla prima over the top of that, it's really inspired me to think about the initial stages that I go through with every painting. And I think it's opening up a few new ways for me to grow and improve certain aspects in my work. And I'm really excited to see how I can apply these things to what I normally work on. I think it'll provide a lot of positive changes that will be evident in the work that I produce moving forward. And that really inspires me and keeps me motivated to continue to find new ways to learn and to improve my work. I believe it's essential almost in order to become the artist you wish to become. Taking on the mindset of the student is, in many ways, a major key to self-improvement. This painting is now the second or third painting in which I've sort of experimented with this new underpainting technique, and I'm very pleased with the results, and I'm excited to see what I can do with it moving forward, especially when I go back to some of my landscape work and my wildlife work. I'm very much looking forward to applying this new way of thinking and this new approach to those works. And I hope that by sharing this and by sharing this story with you, it can help you or help inspire you to maybe try something similar to this or something new in your own work. Thank you so much for watching. And again, I hope you enjoyed this painting.